On November 11, 2018, the quiet hum of a highway was pierced by a chilling scream. Passing motorists stumbled upon a ghastly sight: human remains sprawled across the asphalt, a lifeless figure illuminated by flickering headlights. Federal authorities swarmed the scene, their faces etched with grim determination. The body was soon identified as Gift, a 300-level university student whose vibrant dreams had been snuffed out in an instant. The air buzzed with questions. How did she end up here? What dark twist had claimed her life? Gift's story wasn't always one of tragedy. Born into poverty, she grew up in a cramped home where hope clung to the edges of hardship. Her father, a carpenter, bent over his workbench, hands rough and splintered, crafting furniture for meager pay. Her mother, a fierce market vendor, hawked vegetables under the scorching sun, her voice hoarse from calling out to customers. They poured their love into Gift, their only child, believing education could lift her from the dust of their struggles. After secondary school, Gift took a job, laboring for a year and a half, her savings bolstered by her parents and relatives. When she stepped onto the university campus, her heart swelled with pride. She was their shining star. Her first year was a triumph. Gift's name adorned the honor roll, her intellect a beacon amid the chaos of lectures and late-night studies. But beneath her success lurked a gnawing ache. Money was scarce, her parents' sacrifices barely covering the basics. She watched her peers flaunt stylish clothes, trendy bags slung over their shoulders, living in apartments she could only dream of. The pressure to belong coiled around her like a snake, whispering promises of a better life if she could just reach out and grab it. By her second year, that whisper became a roar. Gift craved more than the hand-me-downs, more than the cramped dorm room. New friends entered her orbit, their confidence intoxicating, their wallets heavy with cash. They beckoned her into a world of neon lights and pulsing beats, a realm of clubbing and fleeting connections. At first, she hesitated, a deer caught in headlights. The club was a storm of sensation, strangers' hands brushing too close, their leers making her skin crawl. "Respect my space," she'd stammer, pulling away as men sneered, "Leave if you're not here to play." One night, her friend dragged her into the bathroom, the mirror reflecting Gift's wide, uncertain eyes. "You wanted wealth, Gift," her friend said, voice sharp as a blade. "These guys can give it to you, but you've got to let them in." The words sliced through her doubt. She thought of her father's weary hands, her mother's cracked heels, the life she'd promised to escape. Swallowing her fear, she stepped back into the chaos. The music thumped in her chest as she danced, men's hands grazing her, their touches no longer rebuffed. Each move felt like a betrayal of the girl she'd been, yet the promise of money dulled the sting. By night's end, her purse bulged with over 128,000 crisp bills she counted in the dim light of her room. Excitement surged through her, a wildfire of validation. Guilt flickered too, a shadow she pushed aside. This, she told herself, was the beginning of everything she'd ever wanted. Gift's life took a dramatic turn after that fateful night, a single heartbeat where everything she'd known unraveled like a thread pulled from a tapestry. The money, those crisp, seductive bills, burned a hole in her pocket, and she spent it with a fervor that bordered on madness. Luxury items piled up in her cramped dorm room, clothes that shimmered like liquid gold, bags so sleek they screamed wealth, and hair styled to perfection, a crown for the queen she'd become. The thrill of her newfound riches pulsed through her veins, a drug more potent than anything she'd ever known, and she turned to her friends, those shadowy guides into this glittering abyss, with a voice trembling with awe. "You've given me everything," she breathed, her praise a hymn to the life they'd unlocked, though a faint tremor of unease flickered in her chest, too quiet to heed. As time slipped through her fingers like sand, Gift's world tilted on its axis. The university, once her sanctuary of purpose, became a ghost town in her mind. She stopped attending classes, her footsteps no longer echoing through lecture halls, her absence masked by bribes slipped into the eager hands of course representatives, hushed deals sealed in dimly lit corridors. When exams loomed, she didn't crack a book. Instead, she wielded her allure like a blade, seducing lecturers with sultry smiles and whispered promises that left them dazed and pliable. Her grades, once earned through sweat and midnight oil, now came at the cost of her dignity, a transaction she justified with a shrug and a smirk. "Money is everything," she'd chant, the words a gospel she clung to, a shield against the gnawing void inside. She convinced herself that wealth was her armor, rendering her academic failures irrelevant, mere pebbles beneath her stilettoed feet. This belief propelled her into a whirlwind of recklessness, a storm she danced within without care. Her body became a bargaining chip, traded in smoky backrooms and neon-lit clubs with men whose faces blurred into a gallery of lust and greed. Each encounter left her richer, her purse fattening as her soul withered, a trade-off she buried beneath the clink of coins and the rustle of bills. One night, the club's haze parted to reveal James, a stranger whose charm hit her like a thunderclap. His voice was velvet, his eyes a lifeline in the chaos, and for a moment, Gift faltered, swept off her feet by a warmth she hadn't felt in months. But love was a chain, a threat to the freedom she'd bled for, the financial empire she'd built on shaky ground. Despite his earnest pursuit, his gentle touch a stark contrast to the groping hands she'd grown used to, she pushed him away. Her heart thudded with regret as she turned back to her promiscuous dance, choosing cold cash over the heat of his gaze, independence over the risk of surrender. Home became a distant memory, its pull severed by her new life. She lingered at school for weeks, months, dodging her parents' calls until their worried voices broke through. "I'm fine," she'd lie, her tone clipped, doing well. But the cracks in her facade were widening. Her mother, dazzled by the fat stacks of money Gift mailed home, saw only a savior, bills paid, food on the table, a daughter who'd risen above their poverty. "She's blessed us," she'd murmur, clutching the cash like a talisman. Her father, though, wasn't blinded. His carpenter's hands, scarred and steady, pushed the money away, his voice a growl of suspicion. "How does she have this? Something's wrong." He sensed the rot beneath the riches, a father's instinct screaming where his wife heard only silence. Her mother spun tales of a part-time job at a company in school, a flimsy shield against his doubts. But when he demanded Gift visit, the sight of her stole his breath, his studious girl replaced by a stranger dripping in extravagance, her eyes dodging him like a cornered animal. "Where's this coming from?" he pressed, his voice a thunderhead, but Gift's answers were smoke, curling away from truth with practiced ease. The air between them crackled, a storm brewing, until her mother stormed in, her scolding a whip crack. "Stop judging her. She's helping us, be grateful." Her defense was fierce, a mother's love twisted into denial, insisting Gift's generosity was a gift, not a curse. Her father's face darkened, his warning a blade cutting through the tension. "This path will destroy her. The truth will come out." He pleaded with his wife, his voice breaking. "She's our only child, don't let her fall." But her mother stood firm, unshakable, her faith in Gift a fortress against his fears. "She's grown," she snapped, "she chooses her life." The words hung heavy, a fragile truce masking the tempest to come, a storm that would crash down on a lonely highway, where Gift's choices would spill out in blood and silence, a reckoning no one could outrun. During Gift's 2-month stay at home, her father grew increasingly suspicious. The air in their modest house thickened with tension, a storm brewing beneath the surface of their everyday routines. Each evening, as the sun dipped low, casting long, eerie shadows across the worn wooden floors of their living room, he'd fix his weathered gaze on her. His eyes, sharp as a hawk's despite his age, missed nothing. "Is the semester over?" he'd ask, his voice a gravelly whisper that cut through the hum of the old television. "Why have you been home for so long? Shouldn't you be in class?" The questions hung in the air like a noose, tightening with each passing day. Gift, sprawled lazily across the threadbare couch, barely looked up from her phone. Her fingers danced across the screen, a shield against his scrutiny. "Everything's fine, Papa. I'll handle it," she'd murmur, her tone light and dismissive, as if his concerns were nothing more than a pesky fly to be swatted away. But her father's worries lingered, festering in his chest like a wound that wouldn't heal. Was their child still attending school, or had she abandoned her studies altogether? The uncertainty gnawed at him, a relentless beast clawing at his peace of mind. As an elderly man, Gift's father had lived long enough to notice the subtle shifts others might overlook. He saw it in the way her silhouette had changed, the way her once familiar frame seemed foreign under the dim glow of the flickering bulb. Her waistline was expanding, her stomach protruding ever so slightly, a curve that whispered secrets he wasn't ready to hear. The thought hit him like a thunderclap. Could Gift be pregnant? It lodged in his throat, a jagged stone he couldn't swallow, choking him with dread. His heart raced as he replayed every moment of her stay, her lethargy, her evasiveness, the way she'd linger in the bathroom longer than usual. Was it fatigue from school, or something far more sinister? He couldn't shake the suspicion, and it grew like a shadow, stretching longer and darker with each sleepless night. Determined to uncover the truth, Gift's father became a silent sentinel in his own home. He began to discreetly monitor her activities, his every move cloaked in the guise of routine. He'd linger in the kitchen, pretending to fuss over a pot of stew, while his ears strained to catch the faintest hint of a clue, a phone call, a whispered conversation, anything. He'd shuffle past her room, his footsteps soft as a ghost's, peering through the crack in the door to watch her. Did her hand drift to her belly? Did she wince as she shifted on the couch? Each observation was a thread in a tapestry of fear he was weaving, stitch by stitch, in his mind. The suspense was suffocating, a vice tightening around his chest. He wasn't just searching for answers, he was chasing a truth that could shatter the fragile world he'd built for his family. Early one morning, the house still wrapped in the hush of dawn, Gift's father could no longer bear it. The weight of his suspicions pressed down on him, heavy as the earth itself. He slipped into the bedroom where his wife slept, her breath soft and even, a stark contrast to the storm raging in his soul. He shook her gently awake, his voice a low, urgent murmur that sliced through the stillness. "Have you noticed anything?" he asked, his brow furrowed so deeply it seemed etched in stone. His wife stirred, bleary-eyed and irritable, her face twisting into a scowl. "Why do you always focus on the negative?" she snapped, her words sharp as a blade. "Why can't you see the good in our child?" Her voice crackled with defensiveness, a shield thrown up against the creeping doubt he'd planted. But he pressed on, undeterred, his tone steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I'm telling you, her body is changing," he said gently, though each word carried the weight of a plea. "Those signs, they're indicative of pregnancy. Please, just check on her in the morning." His words were a spark in a dry field, igniting a blaze of fury. Gift's mother sat up, her eyes flashing with indignation. "How can you even suggest such a thing?" she demanded, her voice escalating into a heated crescendo that rattled the thin walls. "Gift is a hardworking student. Who could have gotten her pregnant?" The accusation hung in the air, venomous and heavy, a cloud that threatened to suffocate them both. He flinched, the sting of her words cutting deeper than he'd expected, but he held his ground. "Just check on her tomorrow," he pleaded, his voice a weary sigh, frayed at the edges. "Don't come yelling at me then." His request was a lifeline tossed into the chaos, but she swatted it away, her anger a tidal wave crashing over him. The room pulsed with their unspoken fears, a battlefield of love and doubt where neither could claim victory. The next morning dawned with a heavy stillness, the kind that presses down like a held breath, thick with secrets waiting to unravel. Gift's mother rose early, her body weary from a night of restless dreams, her eyes tracing the faint cracks in the ceiling as if they held answers. She shuffled to the doorway, her silhouette framed against the pale light, and watched as Gift stepped out to sweep the compound. The broom's bristles scratched against the earth, a grating rhythm that set her nerves on edge. Her daughter moved with a slowness that wasn't there before, her once sharp edges softened, her waistline subtly thickened. Gift's mother's heart lurched, a primal instinct clawing its way to the surface, screaming a truth she couldn't ignore: she's pregnant. The realization was a cold blade twisting in her gut, her breath hitching as she pressed a trembling hand to her mouth, tears prickling at the corners of her eyes. She stepped forward, her slippers scuffing the dirt, her face a map of worry carved deep with maternal dread. "Gift," she said, her voice a fragile thread stretched to breaking, "I think you're pregnant. You look pregnant to me. We need to go to the hospital to confirm." The words trembled in the air, heavy with a love that ached, a plea wrapped in fear. Gift froze, the broom slipping from her grasp to clatter against the ground, a sharp sound that shattered the morning's quiet. She spun to face her mother, her eyes flashing with a wild, cornered intensity. "Mommy, I'm not pregnant," she spat, her voice a jagged edge, slicing through the stillness with a ferocity that belied the panic surging beneath. "It's just a change in my body, that's all." But her mother's gaze was unrelenting, a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog of her denial. "We're going to the hospital," she declared, her tone ironclad, brooking no argument, her resolve a wall Gift couldn't breach. The hospital was a sterile labyrinth, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a swarm of angry bees, casting harsh shadows on Gift's face as she trailed her mother inside. The air reeked of disinfectant, a clinical sting that tightened the knot in her chest. Her mother's hushed conversation with the doctor was a distant murmur, each word a hammer strike forging the trap closing around her. As Gift followed the doctor to the lab, her pulse roared in her ears, a frantic drumbeat drowning out the world. She couldn't let this happen, not here, not now. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she leaned close, her whisper a desperate hiss laced with terror. If I'm pregnant, I'll pay any amount to alter the test results. Make it negative, please. Her eyes, wide and glistening with unshed tears, locked onto the doctor's, a silent scream of anguish and defiance. She named a bribe so astronomical it hung in the air like a thunderhead, a dark pact offered with trembling hands. The doctor's face tightened, her ethics warring with the glittering temptation before her. Gift's plea was a tidal wave, crashing against her resolve, her desperation a siren song too potent to ignore. With a curt nod, she capitulated, her agreement a whispered sin that bound them in a conspiracy of silence, the weight of it settling like ash on Gift's shoulders. Days crawled by, each one a taut wire of anticipation, until the test results arrived, a single sheet of paper bearing a lie as bold as it was brittle: not pregnant. Gift's mother clutched it, her exhale a ragged sob of relief, her eyes shining with a pride that cut Gift deeper than any blade. "I knew you wouldn't disappoint me," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, her arms pulling Gift into a fleeting, fragile embrace. But across the room, her father's laughter rolled out, low and ominous, a storm brewing in his chest. "There's nothing hidden under the sun," he said, his eyes glinting with a knowing that chilled her blood, his words a prophecy dripping with menace. "We'll find out the truth eventually." The air crackled with his unspoken challenge, a hunter's patience lurking in his stare. Gift's smile was a cracked mask, her stomach churning as she seized her chance to flee. "I need to return to school," she blurted, her voice too high, too brittle, a thread about to snap. "There's an important academic commitment." Her parents, still basking in the false glow of the results, nodded, their goodbyes tinged with a vague unease they couldn't name, their trust a blindfold. Gift tightened with every step she took away. The university was a distant mirage as she veered toward Chief Johnson's office, her heels striking the floor like gunshots, her breath ragged with purpose. He sat behind his desk, a king in a kingdom of excess, his wealth a glittering shroud over a life of infidelity. His reputation was a whispered legend, extravagant, ruthless, a married man whose vows were as hollow as his smile. Gift stormed in, her eyes blazing with a fire that could scorch the earth. "I'm pregnant," she declared, the words a grenade lobbed into the silence, raw and unyielding, her voice trembling with the weight of her truth. The chief's smile unfurled, slow and predatory, his eyes glinting with a cold amusement that sent ice down her spine. "Abort it," he said, his tone smooth as silk, sharp as a razor, the casual cruelty of it a slap across her face. Her chest tightened, but she swallowed her pain, her resolve hardening into a weapon. She turned to her friends, those shadowed guides who'd led her into this abyss, their voices a chorus of dark wisdom. They ushered her to a doctor, a spectral figure cloaked in secrecy, and pressed bitter herbs into her hands, promising an end to the life she carried. Chief Johnson sent a thick stack of cash, his signature a careless scrawl, but Gift's greed was a living beast. She lied, her voice steady as she claimed the doctor demanded more, and the chief, ensnared in his own deceit, sent additional funds without a flicker of suspicion. For over a month, Gift hid indoors, her body a war zone scarred by the abortion attempt, her mind a tempest of lies and leverage. She fed the chief a fiction, claiming the pregnancy endured a phantom she wielded to extort more, each payment a balm to her fractured pride, a thread in her unraveling web. The chief's rage simmered, a volcano ready to erupt, his image a fragile veneer threatened by her relentless demands. His wives loomed like specters, their discovery a guillotine poised to sever his wealth in a divorce that would leave him bleeding. He needed this buried, the secret entombed, and Gift's game was a tightening noose around his neck. The tension coiled, a storm brewing in the silence, her lies a house of cards trembling before the wind. The chief's patience frayed, his threats sharpening, And the truth, her father's chilling prophecy, stalked her like a shadow, its breath a whisper of doom. Chief Johnson's voice slithered through the phone, a hushed, urgent whisper that coiled around Gift like a noose. This pregnancy stays buried, Gift. My reputation, my life, depends on it. His tone was a velvet blade, slicing through her resolve, heavy with a desperation that sent shivers racing down her spine. Gift, ever the actress, let her voice quiver with feigned anguish. I tried to end it, Chief, I swear, but it wouldn't work. The lie dripped from her lips, a fragile thread in a web she didn't yet see tightening. The chief's response was swift, cloaked in a chilling calm, you'll give birth abroad. I'll make it happen. The words dangled before her, a shimmering lure, masking the jaws of a trap snapping shut. On November 11, 2018, the highway lay shrouded in shadow, its stillness ruptured by a grotesque discovery, human remains scattered like a grim confetti. Federal authorities descended, their faces carved with unease, blind to the thread that would soon stitch this horror to Gift's doomed path. That night, Gift's pulse thrummed with a volatile mix of hope and dread as she journeyed to meet Chief Johnson. His promise of a foreign escape sang in her mind, a seductive whisper drowning out the warning bells. The hotel loomed ahead, its polished exterior a lie she couldn't read. Inside, the air thickened with menace. She was ushered to a room where food and drinks waited, their warmth a cruel deception. The chief's smile gleamed, a predator's grin, as she ate, oblivious to the poison seeping into her veins. Consciousness fled, and when her eyes fluttered open, the world had shifted. Cold, crumbling walls caged her, ropes biting into her wrists. Chief Johnson towered above, his eyes black pits of rage. You were never pregnant, he snarled, venom lacing every syllable. A doctor nodded beside him, a silent reaper. Her scream clawed at the air, raw and desperate, but it was swallowed by the void. Kill her, the chief hissed, and his henchmen unleashed a storm of brutality, tearing her apart. The highway remains were hers, a shattered mosaic of flesh and bone. The autopsy's revelation cut deeper. She had been pregnant, a life snuffed out with her own. Her parents reeled, her mother collapsing into a chasm of despair. Her father's voice broke, bitter and hollow, this is what happens when you don't listen. Yet, in their shared wreckage, they grasped each other, their love a trembling flame defying the dark, vowing to endure.